So the trick is you do need to imitate a native Spanish speaker and you need to imitate them pretty strongly. Like, you know how sometimes we impersonate friends and maybe like celebrities or family, we like do their voice and do their accent. Yeah, you're going to need to do that for a little bit, at least at the start. And a bit of a heads up, it is going to feel and sound weird at the start. But the thing is, if you don't do it, if you just speak Spanish in your normal, regular English voice, it's going to feel and sound weird permanently. Right. And the good news is you don't actually have to do it forever. Like, let's say this is your normal English voice, your normal accent, and this is like the imitated voice that you're just doing temporarily. What you do pretty quickly is you just you dial it back, so you get closer to your normal voice, and essentially you reach the sweet spot. And the sweet spot is where you still have like the core components of what makes this imitated voice sound like a native speaker, but then you're close enough to your normal voice that you find a hybrid, and then that becomes your new Spanish voice. And then you don't like imitating and it doesn't sound weird, but you're out of like, there's this zone around your normal voice that makes it easy to detect your normal accent and okay, that guy sounds like he's English. Yeah, you need to get outside of that, but then you bring it back to like the edge of that zone. You've still got those components, and then you make your new voice from that. And that's actually a trick not a lot of people talk about. But anyways, if you don't know who I am, my name's Jonathan. I actually started learning Spanish through comprehensible input and immersion in like February times, 2021. So at the time I said, you know what? I would love to be fluent by my birthday. And that was like 8, 9 months away. So I set myself that goal. And I said, if I accomplish this, then I'll go to Spain and I'll just like speak to people in Spanish and kind of enjoy myself. And I actually did. So I documented it on my Instagram. I went to Barcelona, I went to Madrid, and yeah, I was just enjoying myself, I'll be honest. It was a great time. And then since then, I've done some interviews in Spanish, just explaining like the process that I went through and how it works. So this is the interview I did with Mike Ben, and then this is the interview I did with Pablo as well from Dream in Spanish. You might know who he is. And to be fair, like these people, I owe a lot to them. They were instrumental. And definitely when it came to learning Spanish, I learned a lot from like the content they were putting out. But by the way, just so you can see how I speak Spanish now, what I'll do is I'll go through that same introduction that I just did in Spanish. So you can kind of use that as a baseline because we're going to do a few exercises so you can understand what I mean. Pero bueno, si no sabes quién soy, yo me llamo Jonathan. En 2021, en febrero, empecé a aprender español. Y bueno, me puse la meta de llegar a la fluidez para mi cumpleaños en noviembre, unos 8 o 9 meses por ahí. Y me dije, vale, pues si lo consigo, voy a hacer un viaje a España y voy a hablar únicamente en español con los españoles. Y sí, bueno, lo conseguí. Y de hecho, lo documentaba en mi Instagram y los vídeos aún están allí por si quieres echarlos un vistazo. Y nada, desde entonces he hecho unas entrevistas en español explicando mi aprendizaje y el proceso. Y bueno, para que veáis, esta es la entrevista que hice con Mac Ben y esta es la entrevista que hice con Pablo de Dream in Spanish. Y bueno, estoy muy agradecidos a los dos porque me han ayudado mucho durante el proceso. Y ahora, bueno, más o menos estoy aquí. All right, cool. So that's my Spanish voice now, right? And to be fair, I wouldn't say I'm the most, like, I wouldn't say, to be honest, if I'm being completely, I don't actually think when I listen to myself, I sound like a native. But with that being said, I don't think it's obvious that I'm English. And I would say there's 3 key components that make someone sound like a native. And I'd say in those 3 components, which are namely, number 1, the word choices that you select, 2, the grammatical structures that you use, and then 3, like you're more like the accent or how you actually pronounce those words and grammatical structures. I'd say the way I do those heavily lean and kind of indicate a Spanish influence. And the reason why I even bring that up in the first place is because what we need to understand is how does one actually get to the point where they sound like a native? And it's because they're doing all these 3 things in a way that someone can easily identify, oh, that sounds like someone from there, or that sounds like someone from there. Now, why do I mention that? I mention that because before we even do the imitation thing that I was talking about before, the first thing you actually need to do is you need to pick a specific type of Spanish to focus on. Yes, I know there's some language gurus that are like, oh no, you don't need to do that. It's not necessary. It is. Because fundamentally speaking, what sounding like a native is doing those three things in a way that would suggest, oh, okay, that reminds me of how the people from this area do that or this country. Now, bear in mind, like we understand, this is a simple version because we understand that within countries there's different accents, and like someone's accent from London and someone's accent from like Birmingham, for example. If you're from Birmingham, it's completely different. Someone's accent from like Madrid or Barcelona, like the proper one, the Barcelona one, or like from like Sevilla, is like completely different. And we can understand that, but just so it's simple, we're just going to imagine that each country has a neutral accent. Okay. Now, despite the fact that each country has a neutral accent, there are still different types of Spanish that are spoken. And anybody that's learned Spanish for a while, you will appreciate this. Now, in my experience, there's probably five key different types of Spanish. And I know some people are going to get annoyed because I'm going to miss out their country, but we want to keep it simple. And the reason why I mention this is just because it's quite useful to explain a key point. But I'd say, okay, there's like the Spanish from Spain, and let's just assume that there's just one neutral Spanish from Spain, even though there isn't. Let's just assume that. There's like the Spanish from Mexico. There's the Spanish from, I'd say, Argentina, the Spanish from Colombia, and then the like Caribbean Spanish. Those for me are like the key five. And the other countries kind of fit into one of those areas, right? You're going to want to pick one. Yeah, you're going to want to pick one. And by the way, I highly recommend that you do, even if you don't really care about like sounding like a native and all of that stuff. I highly, highly recommend you do, because it will help you to learn and acquire Spanish faster anyway. And the reason why I say that is because fundamentally speaking, learning a language is just building a relationship with the language. So the deeper you have, the deeper the relationship you have with the language, kind of like a friend, the more you know them, the more you know, okay, in this situation, they would do this. If we go to this restaurant, they'll probably want this. This is how they sound. This is how they don't sound. This is what they say. This is what they don't say. And in the same way, you build a relationship with like, let's say Spanish, and that will allow you to understand natives when they speak and start to speak yourself. Now, the challenge is these different five types of Spanish are essentially different languages. And so if we like them to people, they are five different people. It's like having a family of five different brothers, right? Now, I actually personally have three different brothers, so I'm kind of a good example of this. And the point I'm getting at is that, let's say somebody, you know what, we can even use my partner as an example. So my partner knows me very well at deep level, yeah? Even though she knows me very, 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 very well, and she spent a lot of time with me, some of the knowledge that she knows about me will spill onto her knowing my other brothers, right? Now, let me actually reverse that so you can understand my point in a bit more detail. If she had tried to learn all of us at the same time, the relationship that she has with me now wouldn't be as deep. And the problem with that is that you need that deepness of the relationship to be able to speak fluently or even like someone from the language or understand people from that language. So it wouldn't have been a shallow. Like, let's say, hypothetically speaking, she spent 100 hours with me. Instead of spending 100 hours with me, it would have been like split up between like 25 hours each. And the relationship wouldn't be as deep. But if she just does the 100 hours with me, the fact that we're brothers and we do share, like we share the same parents, we share a similar upbringing, same childhood, similar ideas, even if she just spends the time with me and gets deep enough with myself, that will then spill over into her ability to understand my brothers as well, if that makes sense. The same thing happens with these different types of Spanish. Like, if you just focus on one, yes, it's true, you won't fully know the others as deeply, but because your knowledge is so deep in one type of Spanish, it will spill over. And the reason why I even say that is because the main argument why people are like, no, you need to learn from the start. You need to learn from the start is because they're like, oh, there's just so many different ways of saying stuff and you need to know them all. No, you don't. You don't. In fact, when I first started learning Spanish, I listened to that and I was listening to all these different types of Spanish, and it just hindered my progress because I was scattering my time. I was scattering my focus, and I wasn't building the relationship deep. I was just going wide. And it meant that I was always kind of confused because I was hearing things and I didn't know that it was just a different way of saying the same thing, but I didn't know that. And it meant that I was always in almost like a confused state for longer than I needed to be than if I just focused on one type of Spanish. So when I did eventually do that, when I found Dream in Spanish, I was able to progress way quicker. And then when I heard other ways of pronouncing the same thing or expressing the same thing, I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. That's just like another way of saying it. I'm not really confused. I can understand that you say it like that. Well, in Spain, they would say it like this. Cool, we're all fine. Let's carry on, right? So that's the preface to this whole thing. Like, you do need to pick a specific type of Spanish. And if you don't know which one to pick, for me, it was fairly obvious. And I do think, like, generally for most people, it's fairly obvious. But if you're not sure, I would suggest potentially picking the one that's either closest to you geographically or at least closest to your normal voice/accent. What do I mean by that? Like, the way that my voice is in English and then the way that let's say, the Spaniards speak, it is different, but it's way closer than the difference between my voice in English and, like, for example, the way Mexicans speak or the people from Argentina speak or like the people from like La República Dominicana. Is like way different. It's like way different. And what does that mean? When we go back to our imitation thing, the jump is way bigger. So if you can pick someone that's a bit closer, it just makes it a little bit easier to make that little jump, that imitation jump. But again, you can do whatever one you want to do, to be honest, because I actually met one guy, funny story, when I was learning Spanish, I used one app called Tandem to like make friends. And I met one guy and I think he was from the UK or no, he was from Australia or something like that. But then he had like a house flatmate or something that was like from Argentina. And his Spanish was like, when he spoke English and then when he spoke Spanish, it just completely switched. And yeah, no, I'll be honest. I was like, is it? My guy, is that what you're on now? Swear. I can't lie. It was a big difference. But anyways, that's the first thing. Now, once you've picked the one you want to do, so let's say you're like me, you picked, okay, I want Spanish from Spain. What you then need to do is you then need to have an extensive period of time where the majority of the content that you consume and the input that you're receiving in Spanish is the Spanish from that specific type of Spanish, if that makes sense. So, and when I say the majority, I'm talking about like a good 90 to 98%. Naturally, because of the way the world is now, you won't get 100% because even if you're watching like a movie in Spain, like just naturally there's people that have moved around from different countries. So you'll get people from like Mexico in there, you get people from Colombia. And that's actually good. You do want the other ones a little bit, but for the most part, you want it to be a pure focus on that. And the reason why is because what you're doing is you're building a base. You're building almost like, you know how like ships drop the anchor and it makes them strong so that when the winds come, the ship's not going to blow. The same thing happens with like language. Like you need to make the base of your knowledge and understanding in one type of Spanish. And then when the winds of like all the other ways that people pronounce stuff and like the different slang and stuff come and all of the Mexicans come and say stuff and then the Dominicans come and they have like a different way of pronouncing stuff. It's like you already have your base and you're strong. You're like, oh, okay, don't worry. Like I'm not worried. That's just a different way of explaining what I already said, what I already know how to say. Right. And this is actually so key. I know it's a bit of a weird way of explaining it. Maybe people don't explain it like this. It's kind of like the way I see it. But once you do this, it is going to be so much easier to start to speak and sound like a native and even just learn Spanish in general. But we're focusing on sounding like a native because the majority of your knowledge base comes from one type of Spanish in the first place. And so when it comes to those three things, the word choices, the grammatical structures that you're using, and your pronunciation, it will make it easier for those three things to link back to a certain place or a certain type of Spanish, right? Now, I'm not going to say that, oh yeah, you need to do this for 1,000 hours or you need to do this for 2,000 hours before you do anything else. All I'm going to say is if you can do it earlier in your Spanish journey, it's more ideal. If you've already been doing Spanish for a while and you find this video, no problems. Like you can still, it's not the end of the world. But the earlier you do it, the better because you won't be fighting against prior knowledge. But it's okay. And the way you're gonna know, it's not like a certain hours. And it's not like, oh, you need to do 800 hours, 900 hours. I know a lot of people now are focused on that. Don't worry too much about that. Just worry about the symptoms. And the symptoms when you know, like metaphorically speaking, the anchor is hitting the seabed and you're building a base, there's two key symptoms. The first one is that when you do hear the Spanish from the other places or other types of Spanish again, so let's say, for example, you've been focusing on Spanish from Spain and now you hear Spanish from Mexico again, it's going to sound very different. Like it's going to sound a bit like, for example, if I was to um, right now, if I listen to Chinese, I wouldn't be able to tell you any difference between different accents. I probably wouldn't even be able to tell you the difference between Chinese and Japanese in terms of listening to it, or Korean, which isn't good. But I don't really know because it just sounds similar to me. Now, the similar thing will happen to you in Spanish when you're a beginner. Like you won't really be able to tell the difference. But once you've done this process for a while, and then you do get exposed to, let's say, a Mexican speaking or a Colombian speaking, it will sound like raw. Is that how you guys say that? That is nuts. That sounds so different. Like I remember when this happened to me, and it's in a good way, not in like, oh wow, why are you talking like that? It's more like a wow, I can actually clearly hear the difference between the way these guys say this and the way those guys say this. That is a great sign. And it's an even better sign because that's more on like the pronunciation side. On the knowledge side, it's an even better sign when you get to the point where you can do what I call same language translations, whereby like you hear, for example, I don't know, like a Mexican say something, and you know, oh, interesting. In Spain, they say it like this. Or you hear like a Colombian say something, you say, oh, interesting. In Spain, they say it like this. That once you get to that point, you're building the base. You're building the base. And this is going to make it way easier, by the way. It's going to make it way easier to now pull those words, pull those grammatical structures out when you need them. Now, what you want to do, by the way, and not a lot of people talk about this, what you want to do is when you find those opportunities for same language translations, you want to take note of those because these are the situations. Like, for example, let's say, I'll use a simple example. Let's say you hear someone say carro and you've been hearing coche, 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 and someone says carro. That tells you that, okay, this is an opportunity for me to sound more like a Spaniard. Whenever I want to say this, I'm going to say coche. I'll give you another example, yeah, and you understand the point. But like I remember just learning Spanish in general, I always learned zapatos y zapatillas. And then I remember like when I started spending more time with my partner, she would always say bambas, bambas, bambas. And I was like, okay, cool. This is an opportunity for me to sound more like a Spaniard. Let me start saying bambas, bambas, bambas. Do you get it? And I know some other people say los tenis, los tenis. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say bambas, bambas. By the way, we haven't even got to the imitation pronunciation part. We're just focusing on right now on the vocab and the grammar structures of how to sound more like a native. So whenever you find these examples and you're like, oh wow, that's how they say it, but what I've been watching, they say it like this. That is an area that if you say it like that when you speak, and if you start to force yourself to say it like that when you speak, that's how you're gonna create the illusion of, oh, this guy sounds like a native. He sounds like, oh, you sound like you're from Spain. These are some of the tricks. Okay. Now, bear in mind, by the way, you see, the way this works is that it is a continuous process. And it's not something that you just do once. And by the way, when we get to the pronunciation side, this becomes even more evident. But like you always want to be looking for ways to improve the way you like the word selection and the grammar selection, if that makes sense. So, for example, and this is what makes Spanish language learning interesting. Something like Spanish, but there's so many different ways. Like you always want to be on the lookout for, wow, is that how those guys say it? Okay, that makes sense. This is how we say it. So I was watching a series with my partner called El Patrón del Mal. I think it's called that, which is about Pablo Escobar, right? Very good series, by the way. Excellent series. Anyways, I realized that when they were leaving places in a hurry, they used to say "Ya fuimos," and I'd never heard of that before. Excuse me, I never heard of that before, and I was like, "Raw, that is an interesting concept." I could understand because I already had the base, I already had the anchor down. It wasn't like I was confused about what they meant. But I was like, "Raw, that's an interesting way of saying that." And then when they used to also say something else, and we used to start joking about this. Me and my partner, we used to like have jokes, and they used to say "ese man," and I said, "What is it? Ese man?" They used to say that, and then the other thing they used to say, like, and I learned this through the series. I think there was one time Pablo was speaking to his wife, and he said, "Estás brava conmigo," And I said, okay, okay. Now, what is my point here? It sounds so small, but these are little situations whereby I'm like, raw, that's interesting. How would I have said that in my way of speaking Spanish? And this is where it really helps to have a friend. Obviously, I have a partner now, which makes it so much easier. But what you do is you find these situations. You know how I said it's like an ongoing thing? You can go back to your friend, and now it's not about like the basic level is, oh, how do you say this in Spanish? But the more advanced level, when you're trying to sound more like a native, is, by the way, how would you personally say this? Like, how would you say this? Like, I was watching this thing, they said, oh, estás bravo conmigo. How would you say this? Bueno, estoy enfadada, estás enfadada. I know that's what my partner would say. "Oh, estás enfadada conmigo, estás molesta." No, yeah, estás molesta or estás enfadada. That's what she would say. If that makes sense. So like, you start to know, okay, cool. This is where I can distinguish myself a little bit from the crowd, from the others, and start to put myself in the camp of the people that say it like this, right? Now, to add to that level, guys, to add to that level, if you can now start watching people like streamers or people that make very conversational style videos in that specific type of Spanish, um, you're even going to go to the next level. You're going to go to the next level because what you're going to do is you're going to find the more minute ways that people express themselves within that context. Now, sometimes there will be spillover, and don't get me wrong, you don't have to be perfect. None of us are perfect, but like this is the thought process. Some of this I did subconsciously, but some of this I did consciously. Like I remember I used to always go. If you ask my partner, I always say, "Oh, how would you say it? How would you say it? How would you say this?" Or sometimes I'll hear something and like another way of expressing it. Like I'll give you a simple example. Like you know how sometimes people would say mesero, but then in Spain they might say camarero or something like that. Yeah, I'm like the way I've programmed myself is to always be on the lookout for like, all right, how would you say that? How would you say that? How would they say that? And when you're asking yourself that question, it helps you to just really refine that process. Now, bear in mind, if you can just do this, we haven't even touched the pronunciation accent side, which is what I was talking about, the imitation game. But if you just do this, regardless of how you speak, you're gonna sound more like a native. And anybody can do this, regardless of the voice you have, regardless of I mean the level, you do need to have a fairly high level to do this, but regardless of like the voice that you have, or like some of the challenges you have pronouncing some of the words, you can do this regardless because it's just the words, the grammatical structures, and yeah, like the phrases that they're using. If you can pay attention to these things, then when you're speaking, you repeat those ones that you've learned. You stay away from the ones that you know that aren't assigned with that area. Then that's how you start to sound more like a native, if that makes sense. And by the way, you might be thinking, "Wow, this is extra. Like I can't be asked to do this. I just wanted to have fun, learn Spanish." That's fine. Like you don't have to do this, but this is specifically if you want to sound more like a native, because this is like the way where you start to find those 0.1%, 0.2%, 0.3% improvements in how you're pronouncing things, right? Excellent. Sorry, in how you're expressing yourself. Excellent. So let's move on to the pronunciation side and like the accent side of things and what I was talking about with imitating. Now, this is more of a jump, I'll be honest. Like this one here is going to require a few things. It's going to require confidence. It's going to require practice. It's going to require attention to detail. And it's also going to require, I don't know if I would say the willingness to like leave your comfort zone. Um, yeah, the willingness to leave your comfort zone, but also it's the continuous self-evaluation. Continuous, by the way. Because what happens here is, yes, you are going to start to imitate. Yes, you are going to start to experiment. And by the way, when I say you have to practice this, like the first time you do the imitation thing, it's not really going to sound good. You're going to be, especially if you're someone that's already started speaking in Spanish, this is going to be a little bit harder, but it's okay. You still can do it, but it's going to be something you're going to have to practice. I've seen videos of people that switch their accent after years of already speaking Spanish. So you can do it. You just have to ask yourself whether it's worth it for you. But if you want to do it, it's going to take practice. It's going to take confidence and the willingness to leave your comfort zone, because you have to be willing to feel that embarrassment and even feel And maybe someone noticed that, well, are you like trying to do a Spanish accent there? Like, is that what your Spanish accent sounds like? And you're gonna have to feel that and be like, yeah, you know, like just laugh it off. And I know it's a bit easier than it sounds, but there's no other way. Because if not, like for example, if I just speak in my normal voice, and this is why I did the example earlier, like if I was to just speak normally in my normal English voice, normal accent, bar sonority, y no creo que vayas a pensar que yo sea un nativo, um, igual estoy exagerando un poco, pero de verdad, um, me cuesta más hablar así porque no me salen las palabras cuando hablo así, right? Like, yeah, like genuinely, that's like me not doing any imitation and just speaking like with my normal voice. And you'll see, by the way, you'll see people that speak really good Spanish, and they like you can see that they've never left their normal voice. They still speak like how they speak in English or in German or wherever it is. And by the way, I've been saying this multiple times, that is okay. Like you don't have to force it. But if you want to go to that level, like I'm the type of person, I'm just like, bro, if I'm gonna learn this Spanish thing, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna full send the thing, bro. So I was like, all right, cool. Let me actually go to the extreme and then work my way back. So at the start, it was sounding a bit weird, but what happens is with the practice, as I said, like you will get to the point whereby it's way more natural and you start refining. It takes time, by the way, but you start refining how you say things. And this is why I said that it takes continuous improvement and it takes extreme attention to detail. And I think maybe because I'm like I play keyboard. So I play keyboard at my church every week. I've been doing so for years. That could be an advantage, I'll be honest. I'm not the best keyboardist. Like there's people that are way better than me. But I guess potentially I have that ability to hear like little differences and be like, that sounds off. That sounds off. That sounds off. When people like are singing and they change the key, I'm like, oh, yeah, you've changed the key. Because I'm just so used, like I'm so sensitive to when I'm playing and someone changes the key because it just messes up everything. I'm so sensitive, like, oh yeah, you've changed the key. So potentially that helps. But everybody at a certain level has the ability to be self-critical and be like, okay, let me, on a bit more of a minute level, analyze what do they say, how do they sound, and how do I sound? And by the way, what you want to do, like what I did, is you just look for little wins. You won't get to the finished product straight away, but there's going to be little things you can improve. So, for example, I remember one of the first things I did, because I was like, okay, I want to sound like a Spaniard. The first thing I started doing was I started forcing myself to say hacer instead of saying hacer. Or hacer. Yeah, hacer. Like I was saying hacer. And there was like a period of time where I would just force myself to do that. Great. Then I would say, okay, cool. Another thing that we say, or the Spanish say, is like they're going to be using vosotros. So I started getting in the habit of using that. Because bear in mind, obviously, even within the Spanish, and this is kind of like vocab as well. So this is slightly different, but it still applies. And then, for example, like another, and this is kind of grammar, but another one is like, you know how you could say hoy fui a la tienda, or you can say hoy he ido a la tienda. I started like using, okay, he ido, hemos ido, has ido, hemos hablado con ellos. And to be fair, I even got to the point where it's actually a bad habit because I'm using it too much when I shouldn't be using it, in the sense of like, I'll be like, oh, ayer he ido a la playa. That's not correct, like grammatically. So I've had to start to work that out. So some of these things will happen. You do have to work off bad habits as part of language learning. But the point is, yeah, like there's always the opportunity for you to say, okay, like this could be a little bit better. This could be a little bit better. For example, not even too long ago, I remember I was in Spain with my partner, and she said something, and I was like, what? I've been saying this wrong the whole time. Like she said, I've been saying azúcar. And I heard, she was like, we were in the shop, and she was like, oh, tienes esta bebida sin azúcar instead of azúcar, is what I've been saying. And I was like, you know, I pulled up. I remember in the moment, I pulled up Spanish. Have you guys used Spanish dictionary before? I pulled up Spanish dictionary and I was like, wait, what? And I was like, no, 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 oh, no, no. I was like, whoa, the accent's on the U, bro. And then I was like, let me listen to it.
Azúcar.
Azúcar. I was like, no way. I was like, bro, you mean you're telling me all these years I've been saying this wrong? And here's the thing, yeah, that's actually a good thing. Like, you want to be in a position where it's okay to be like, raw. Like, this is actually the good thing. You want to be in a point whereby you're like, raw, I've been saying this wrong the whole time. Let me change it. Let me change it. Let me change it. Not in a way where you get down, but it's more like, oh, raw, this is because this is an example. These are opportunities for you to become that little bit more native, that little bit more native, that little bit more sounding like a native. Does that make sense? Because these are those, it adds up, if that's my point. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's probably like next week, I'll probably realize that, raw, is that, I'll probably watch this video back and be like, raw, is that how I said that? That's not how it sounds. And then I have to change it. And then you go to the next one and you have to change it. And it's these little wins, little wins, they add up. And if you can do it, like, for example, you have a friend or, like in my case, a partner that is from that place, and bit by bit, you can start to be self-critical. Not in like you get really down and like bad on yourself, but more like a, where can I improve? Where can I improve? Where can I improve? Where can I improve? Then bit by bit, added on to the imitation, and then the imitation is becoming more normal. You start to like create the normal. Okay, wow, I'm starting to get there. Yeah, that's how it works. But anyways, that's my 2 cents. Do you have any questions? Leave them down in the comments. If you have any thoughts, leave it in the comments. I'll probably reply to any questions I'll probably make a video about it. If you have any topics or anything, drop it in the comments. I'll make a video about like the whole topic. And I will see you very, 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 very soon.